The history of the Euros, I guess. So it's 1996 and football has changed greatly in the past 4 years. The back pass rule has been introduced, preventing goalkeepers picking up the ball when receiving passes from their teammates, seen as necessary following Denmark's continued exploitation of the tactic in Euro 92. The European Cup has been rebranded to the Champions League, and the Premier League has just concluded its 4th season, with its growing popularity making it feel apt that in 1996 the European Championship would take place in its birthplace, England. Frank Skinner, David Bedell, and the Lightning Seeds 3 Lions was being played on the airways across the nation as hopes for the first title since 1966 began to rise in England. However, one of the pre-tournament favourites, the Netherlands, Euro debutant Switzerland, and old enemy Scotland stood in their way. In the other groups, groups, plural. Oh yes, I forgot to say, Euro 96 saw the tournament grow from just 8 teams to 16, meaning there were 4 groups and a new quarter-final stage. Therefore, alongside Switzerland, Turkey and Bulgaria qualified for the first time, whilst Croatia, Russia and the Czech Republic qualified for the first time in their modern forms. Ahead of both England and the Netherlands, Germany and Italy were seen as the tournament favourites. Italy, just 2 years on from their penalty shootout loss in the World Cup final, had an utterly ridiculous squad consisting of the likes of Maldini, Nesta, Zola and Del Piero. The man who was not in the squad was the star of that World Cup, Roberto Baggio, who had fallen out with Italian coach Arrigo Sacchi following the tournament, finding himself left out of the squad for the Euros. It therefore made sense that a well-coached, experienced and cohesive German side were given a slight edge by the bookies. But that would be tested in the group stage as the 2 favourites joined Russia and the Czech Republic in Group C. Neither Russia or the Czech Republic were viewed with the same fear as they had been a decade or so previously, with an anecdote from Patrick Berger, a Czech Republic player for Dortmund, later revealing that his club teammate Jurgen Kohler asked him what he was doing for the summer, not realising the Czech Republic had qualified, let alone were in their group. Although Germany's 2-0 victory against the Czechs prevented Kohler from too much embarrassment. However, in the very next game, the Czech Republic would stamp their mark on the tournament, beating a rotated Italy squad 2-1 thanks to first half goals from Pavel Nedved and Radak Bajbul, meaning Italy needed to beat the Czech Republic's result in the final group game to progress. They did not. No, a Gianfranco Zola missed penalty and an 88th minute Vladimir Smisa equaliser against Russia saw the Czech Republic secure second place, seeing Italy crash out. Lightning wouldn't strike twice as Denmark finished behind both Portugal and Croatia in Group D, whilst Group B saw favourite Spain and France qualify, although Spain needed an 84th minute equaliser against Romania to secure the final spot. We can go back to Group A now, where England disappointed their home fans in the opening game, drawing with Switzerland, whilst their northern enemy earned a well-fought draw with the Dutch, setting up a famous encounter between the 2 sides at Wembley in the second group game. England took the lead through the head of Alan Shearer, although a second half penalty gave the Scots an opportunity to find an unlikely equaliser. However, David Seaman saved Scotland captain Gary McAllister's penalty, with Gascoigne doing this. One of the most iconic goals and celebrations in Euro history. England would face the Netherlands in the final group game, with both sides only needing a draw to progress. However, England refused to settle for that, putting together arguably their most impressive performance in major finals history, racing out to a 4-0 lead after just an hour. Meaning, with Scotland leading Switzerland 1-0, the live group had Scotland progressing for the first time in their history. However, just as it always seems to happen with Scotland, fate was against them, as a 78th minute Kluivert consolation goal was enough to see the Netherlands finish second, thanks to the third tiebreaker of more goals scored. Therefore, the quarterfinals would look like this, beginning with England against Spain. After their performance against the Netherlands, expectations were high, however neither team could score in 120 minutes, with England edging the chances, but with the Spanish being denied a clear penalty when Paul Gascoigne slashed down Alfonso Perez. But this took us to penalties, and as we all know, England lose penalties. Wait, they didn't lose? No, Hierro smashed the ball over the bar with Spain's first, and England put away 4 in a row, including Stuart Pearce, who redeemed himself for his decisive miss against West Germany in the 1990 World Cup semi-final. So when Nadal, no not that one, Miguel Nadal, had his penalty stopped by Seaman, England won, setting up a semi-final with their biggest footballing rivals, Germany, who had beaten an impressive Croatia side 2-1 in their quarter-final. French manager Ami Jacquet decided to park the bus against the Netherlands, despite possessing talents like Zidane, Desailly and Blanc. But it somewhat worked, stifling the Dutch attack and keeping a clean sheet. The problem for the French was that they couldn't score themselves, meaning a second quarter-final would end 0-0 and go to penalties, with France advancing after 20-year-old Clarence Seedorf had his penalty stopped. They would face underdogs Czech Republic in the semi-final, who shocked Portugal 1-0, thanks to a wonder goal from Slavia Prague midfielder Karol Poborský, which gives Gascoigne a run for his money for goal of the tournament. Both semis continued the pattern of penalty shootouts as both games were destined for spot kicks. France once again played out a boring goalless draw, however they couldn't make it through on this occasion as Reynaud Pedro had his penalty saved, earning the Czechs an unlikely place in the final. But in the other semi-final, England, Germany, Wembley, 30 years on from 66, 6 years on from Italia 90. Both teams out for their own sort of revenge. Who would strike first? England would, through Alan Shearer's fifth of the tournament. However, unfazed, Germany struck back 13 minutes later through Kuntz. Something I haven't mentioned before now was the introduction of golden goal for this tournament. That rule being, whoever scored first in extra time won the game straight away. This is relevant as Paul Gascoigne was millimetres away from sending England to the final when a Shearer ball whizzed across the 6-yard box. But penalties beckoned. Shearer, Platt, Pearce, Gascoigne, Sheringham all scored, but so did the Germans, meaning defender Gareth Southgate had to step up. His poorly timed penalty was saved, allowing Andreas Müller to send Germany through to the final. The final was seen as a foreseen conclusion, but it also had done so 4 years previously, and we know how that ended. And it looked like it could happen again when Patrick Berger put away a 59th minute penalty, but then a German hero emerged in the very unlikely form of Oliver Bierhoff. A typical target man, he had been playing for Ascoli in Serie B only a year prior and hadn't appeared since the second group game against Russia. But desperately needing a goal, Bertie Vogts turned to Bierhoff, and he delivered, heading home the equaliser and scoring a deflected effort in extra time to win the game and earn Germany their third European title. Despite conceding the penalty in the final, Matthias Sammer, a converted sweeper, was the tournament's best player, providing a last hurrah for a role that many of the most talented players of the 20th century played in and excelled at, whilst Alan Shearer's 5 goals were enough to earn him the Golden Boot. The turn of the millennium saw the Euros be co-hosted for the first time as the Netherlands and Belgium won their bid ahead of Austria and Spain. Alongside them, Slovenia and Norway would qualify for the first time, whilst England's golden generation needed a playoff victory against Scotland to book their ticket to the finals. As a result, they would find themselves alongside the golden generations of Romania and Portugal, as well as reigning champs Germany in the group of death. England would throw away a 2-0 lead in the opening game to Portugal, to lose 3-2, whilst Germany laboured to a 1-1 draw with Romania, amping up the pressure for the following game in a rematch of the 96 semi-final against Germany. However, whereas England had clearly a more talented squad than 4 years earlier, Germany had less, with coach Eric Ribbeck being extremely unpopular in the dressing room due to his reported amateur approach to coaching. England would therefore sneak home to a relatively uneventful 1-0 victory. Germany's miserable attempt to defend their title would be concluded by a 3-0 drubbing from Portugal in the final group game, with Sergio Conceição scoring a hat-trick. This meant England only needed to draw against a now ageing Romania side that peaked 6 years earlier at the 1994 World Cup. However, despite leading 2-1 with Romania captain off injured, a team consisting of Martin, Neville, Campbell, Keown, Wise, Scholes, Ince, Beckham, Owen and Shearer were eliminated in the group stage when an 88th minute foul from Phil Neville was put away from the penalty spot by Gania. Elsewhere, managed by 1968 winner Dino Zoff, Italy overcame the disappointment of 4 years earlier to go perfect in Group B, joined in the knockout rounds by Turkey, who overcame host Belgium in the final round to qualify, making Belgium the first host nation to fail to qualify from the group stage in Euro history. Group C saw the Federation of Yugoslavia and Spain advance ahead of the two tournament debutants, although Spain needed to overcome an opening day defeat to Norway to achieve this, with Spanish goalkeeper Jose Molina immediately having his international career ended following his disappointing mistake that led to Norway's goal. Even in injury time in the final group game, Spain looked destined for elimination, when seemingly out of nowhere, a Mendieta penalty and an Alfonso half volley saw Spain overturn the result to secure top of the group, whilst in Group D the host Netherlands and reigning world champions France overcame the two previous tournament dark horses to book their place in the knockout round. All 4 quarterfinals saw the favourites go through, which could be seen as a shame as we wouldn't have any Cinderella stories like the 2 previous tournaments. However, when you look at the 2 semi-final matchups, you couldn't help but be excited. The Netherlands were coming into this round with particular confidence, having thrashed the Federation of Yugoslavia 6-1 in their previous round, and the game started perfectly against Italy for them, with Zambrotta being sent off in the first half, and then they were awarded a penalty when Nesta fouled Kluivert, but captain Frank de Boer missed. But anyway, they got a second one a little bit later, so it didn't really matter. But yet again the Netherlands failed to score, this time when Kluivert hit the post. After the Italian defence held on strong, the Dutch poor penalties would go on to affect them in the shootout, with 3 of their 4 penalties being missed, sending Italy to the final, with this being the Netherlands' most embarrassing choke in Euro history. In the other semi-final, France, now managed by Aimé Jacquet's assistant Roger Lemaire, just like they had done in '84, switched between 2 different formations based on their opponents, opting for a 4-4-2 diamond in the semi-final against Portugal, wanting to utilise the pace of Henry and Anelka in behind, whilst providing protection through a defensive midfield trio of Vieira, Deschamps and Petit. However, the player that shone most in the semi-final was Zidane, putting in one of the best individual performances in championship history, catching the eye of even Pelé, who said, "Zidane is better now than he was 2 years ago. He has more confidence to dictate a game as well as star in it." His performance would be tipped off with the golden goal in extra time, which sent France to their first Euro final since 1984. The final was arguably the most iconic game in the championship's history. Dino Zoff's tactical setup neutralised Zidane's impact, and the Italians looked set to win the title, when in the 94th minute, a launch free kick found the head of substitute Trezeguet, who knocked it down for Sylvain Wilford, who smashed it into the bottom corner, sending the game to extra time through the most basic of goals. David Trezeguet would continue his impact off the bench by scoring the golden goal in the 103rd minute, making France the first reigning World Cup champion to win the Euros. Despite not being at his magical best in the final, Zidane was still clearly the player of the tournament, following in the footsteps of Platini 16 years earlier, whilst Patrick Kluivert could wipe away the tears of his penalty miss with his golden boot, which he shared with Federation of Yugoslavia forward Savo Milicevic. The eye of Europe turned to Portugal for the Euro 2004, as the hosts added a collection of Mourinho's Champions League winning Porto squad to the golden generation that performed so well 4 years earlier, in addition to teenage sensation Cristiano Ronaldo. Despite the optimism, France and Italy were still considered the 2 favourites for the Cup, even though both had poor showings at the 2002 World Cup. The biggest surprise of qualifying was Latvia's playoff victory against World Cup 3rd place finishers Turkey, securing a nation who had never finished above 4th in a qualifying group before a place in the finals. They would join 3 previous champions of the competition in Group D, with them not actually embarrassing themselves, taking the lead against the Czech Republic in the opening game, before 2 second-half goals saw them fall short of a point. However, they wouldn't have to wait long to get that point, with a clean sheet against an underwhelming German side earning them a draw. Their dreams of qualifying would be killed in the final group game, losing 3-0 to the Netherlands, joining Germany with an early flight out of Portugal. Elsewhere, a talented Sweden squad, which mixed youth with experience, epitomised by a front partnership of Henrik Larsson and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, swiped aside Bulgaria 5-0 in the opening game, then earned a late draw against Italy thanks to an astonishing flick-chipped volley by Ibrahimovic. Denmark had also beaten Bulgaria and drawn with Italy, meaning that under tie-break rules, a 2-2 draw in their final group game would be enough to see both Scandinavian nations advance, ending Italy's tournament early. And wouldn't you know it, a late Matthias Johnson goal made it 2-2. Many Italians remain suspicious to this day that Denmark and Sweden conspired to get the result that suited both teams. However, for Italy, these excuses didn't make up for their early exit, with manager Trapattoni being replaced by Marcello Lippi. Group B saw England matched up with favourites France, alongside unfancied Croatia and Switzerland teams. As England's generation, aided by a teenage sensation of their own in Wayne Rooney, were at their absolute peak. Many people in England believed their opening day encounter would see England anoint themselves as Europe's best, and it began to look that way. Frank Lampard headed home a David Beckham free kick before an electrifying Rooney won a penalty. However, as it always seems to be with England, a penalty was their undoing, with Bartos saving Beckham's. Although they got to the end of the 90 leading, when of course Zidane stepped up and put away an amazing free kick. And then to rub salt into England's wounds, a poor Gerrard back pass would see James foul Henry, allowing Zidane to put away a second in injury time to earn a famous comeback victory. England responded by scoring 7 in their next 2 games, 4 of which were by a completely fearless Wayne Rooney, who became the youngest scorer in the finals history, although Johan van Lolten would break that record 4 days later when he scored Switzerland's goal in their 3-1 loss to France. Finally, in Group A, Portugal overcame a shock defeat in the tournament opener to Greece to qualify top, whilst the second half equaliser by Angelos Haristeos against a star-studded Spain earned Greece a shock place in the quarter-final. This set up a mouth-watering quarter-final between the hosts and England's golden generation, and the game started perfectly for England, with Michael Owen taking advantage of a defensive mistake to put away a distinctive flicked finish. But then, England's great hope, Wayne Rooney, was forced off through injury, being replaced by Darius Vassell, a forward who'd scored just 9 times the previous season in the Premier League for Aston Villa and was in no way in the same class of Rooney. As the game went on, Portugal got control of the game, equalising the 83rd minute through Helder Postiga, a player who was seen as a joke in England after scoring just 2 goals for Tottenham the previous season. However, a last set piece of the game would see England win through the head of Sol Campbell, setting up a semi-final with... Wait, the referee blew a foul? For what? I don't know. Nobody knows. It's extra time it is then. And wow, Rui Costa's won it with a wonderful goal. Actually no again. UEFA has removed the golden goal in favour of the silver goal, meaning England had 10 minutes to find an equaliser, and they would through Frank Lampard, sending the game to penalties, which Portugal would of course win, with Vassell missing the crucial penalty, with him never playing for England again. However, England's golden generation would have one more opportunity to win the Euros in 2008. I'm sure they can't mess that up. In the semi, Portugal would face the Netherlands, who also needed a penalty shootout to get past Sweden in the quarterfinals. If Rooney announced himself to the international stage during the group stage, this was when Cristiano Ronaldo showed to the world he was a special talent, scoring a header to give the Portuguese the lead and giving Van Bronckhorst a hell of a day throughout the match. Portugal would advance 2-1, with Greece awaiting them in the final. Greece! Yes, that's right, Greece, who were 80-1 to win the Euros at the beginning of the tournament, were in the final. Managed by German Otto Rehhagel, Greece played an old-school man-marking system built around a strong defence, switching between a 4-5-1 and 5-4-1 throughout the tournament, depending on if the opposition were playing with 1 or 2 strikers. Greece became impenetrable, keeping a clean sheet against France and the Czech Republic, with a 65th minute header from winger Angelos Haristeas against France, and a 105th minute header from defender Trianos Delas against the Czech Republic, being enough to earn Greece their place in the final. Greece had believed they could do something special throughout the tournament, with substitute striker Demis Nikolaidis stating prior to the second group game, "The 1992 Danish team is a great example for us. They did amazing things even though they were far from being the best squad. I don't think that team was better than our team today." Facing host Portugal in the final would be an even tougher task than anything they'd faced so far. However, they had already shown they could beat them in the opening game of the tournament. For Portugal, this was as good an opportunity as you could ever hope for to win your first major trophy. And it was this pressure of expectation that may have got to Portugal, with them being rather flat. Definitely the least entertaining final of the modern age, with Figo and Ronaldo, who had been so electrifying throughout the tournament, failing to influence the game. This was perfect for Greece, however, and when they won a corner early in the second half, Angelos Karastasis headed home his third of the championships. They held on valiantly to win 1-0 against all the odds, making them the most unlikely of champions, outshadowing even the shock of Denmark 12 years earlier. With Cristiano Ronaldo in tears on the field, Portugal's day of coronation was cancelled, with the Portuguese fans being shocked into silence. Captain and defensive midfielder Theodoros Zacharakis was awarded the player of the tournament and would go on to finish 5th at the Ballon d'Or that year. Milan Baros, the star man of a really impressive Czech Republic side, won the Golden Boot with 5 goals, whilst Rooney and Ronaldo both earned their place in the team of the tournament as teenagers. A Wally with a brolly. That was what was plastered across the front page of English tabloid newspaper, the Daily Mail, because that day England lost at Wembley 3-2 to an underestimated Croatia, meaning England's golden generation finished below both Russia and Croatia in qualifying, seeing them miss the European Championships for the first time since 1984, by far the highest profile team to fail to qualify since the expansion to 16 teams. England were an embarrassment, with manager Steve McLaren unsurprisingly being sacked the day after. However, this qualification campaign almost threw up some more shocks. Scotland beat France home and away, but lost their final 2 games to Italy and Georgia to finish 2 points behind the French, whilst Portugal only finished 3 points above third place Serbia, and Berbatov's Bulgaria finished just 1 point off the Dutch. For the tournament itself, an Austria and Switzerland joint bid won a heavily contested 7-way fight for the hosting rights, with Austria's automatic qualification surprisingly being their first appearance at the finals, whilst Poland, who topped Portugal's qualifying group, be drawn with each other in Group B, alongside Germany and Croatia. Both debutants would lose their opening game and fail to score, but would play out a 1-1 draw against each other in the following game, with Ivica Vastic's injury time penalty making him the oldest goalscorer in the competition. Whilst in Klagenfurt, Croatia, who made such a statement at Wembley, doubled down by beating tournament favourites Germany 2-1, with 35-year-old captain Niko Kovac, in addition to some lesser known talents that you may or may not know in Ivan Rakitic and Luka Modric, dominating Germany's midfield, with Germany coach Joachim Löw moving away from the 4-4-2 in favour of 4-2-3-1 in response to this. Germany would advance, however, to the quarter-finals for the first time since 1996 after a thumping Micheal Ballack free kick earned them a 1-0 victory against the hosts. Whilst the other host, Switzerland, would also fall at the group stages, despite beating previously perfect Portugal in the final game. However, late Turkish goals was the story of this group, with following opening day defeat to Portugal, a long-range injury time effort from Arda Turan earned them a victory against Switzerland, whilst in their final game against the Czech Republic, Turkey saw one of the greatest comebacks in tournament history. 2-0 down, Arda Turan caught Petr Cech out at his near post in the 75th minute, with the goalkeeper making another uncharacteristic mistake to give Nihat an equaliser in the 87th. This saw both teams tied with 4 points and equal on all tiebreakers, meaning the game looked destined for penalties until captain Nihat stepped up again, scoring his second in the 89th minute to see Turkey advance to the knockout rounds for the first time. Group C was earmarked as the group of death, as well as Romania, who were seen as an outsider to advance. However, they did their best to prove people wrong by drawing both the World Cup finalists in their opening 2 games, with a wonderful penalty save from Buffon preventing the World Cup champions from embarrassment, whilst the Netherlands absolutely smashed Italy and France 3-0 and 4-1 respectively. France, who saw a mix of generations, being particularly poor against the Dutch, with reports suggesting Makelele and Benzema had a physical confrontation following the game, showing a clear divide in the camp. With the Dutch confirmed group winners heading into the final game, they could afford to make changes against Romania, who knew a win would see them advance. However, a fully rotated Netherlands side still possessed Robben, Van Persie and Huntelaar, with the latter two getting on the scoreboard in their 2-0 victory, meaning the World Cup final replay would be a playoff for the knockout round, with Italy coming out on top once again with a relatively comfortable 2-0 win. Having finished bottom in the group, French manager Raymond Dominique gracefully resigned as manager following the game. What? It can't be true. It is. Instead of resigning, Dominique used his post-match interview to propose to his girlfriend, remaining in his post to the next World Cup. What could go wrong? The final group saw tournament second favourite Spain showcase their credentials by sweeping the group, scoring 8 in the process. Experienced manager Luis Aragonés controversially banished record scorer Raúl when appointed, and had previously been associated with defensive and direct teams. However, as he would explain, he was a pragmatist, believing that a team which possessed midfield talent like Iniesta, Xavi, Fabregas, Alonso, Silva and Cazorla would be better suited to playing a possession style of football. Reigning champions Greece would fall well short of repeating their fairy tale, losing all 3 games, meaning once again the final group game would essentially be a playoff for the quarter-final. Sweden were the more well-known team to general football fans, with them having 11 players playing in Europe's top 5 leagues, including superstar Ibrahimovic, whilst Russia was more of a mystery. 22 of their 23-man squad played domestic football in Russia. However, Russia had finished above England in qualifying and were adding star forward Andrei Arshavin to the team that comfortably beat Greece following the conclusion of a suspension he picked up in the final game of qualifying. And Arshavin would come in and be the difference, scoring 1 and playing a crucial role in another, as Russia beat Sweden 2-0, securing the final spot in the quarter-finals, although they would be drawn against one of the 2 standout teams in the tournament in the Netherlands, who had just had the luxury of resting their starting 11. However, the rest wouldn't be the advantage everyone expected, with Russia dominating the game from minute 1, pressing and running all game, just as the Soviet Union had done so 20 years earlier against Italy, winning the game 3-1 after extra time, with Arshavin famously nutmegging Van der Sar and shushing the crowd when he put away the third to complete another masterful performance. Elsewhere, Germany, now with Thomas Hitzelsberger at the base of midfield, beat Portugal 3-2, with a now free Micheal Ballack scoring the winner, whilst late goals would once again be the story for Turkey. However, not for them on this occasion, as following 118 minutes of a dull game, Luka Modric put a lovely cross onto the head of Ivan Klasnic, who put away the winner. The whole squad and even manager Slaven Bilic ran onto the pitch in celebration, earning the exciting Croatian side a spot in the semis against Germany. Wait, what just happened? Turkey scored another late goal? Where a now broken Croatia scored just 1 of 4 penalties, seeing Turkey reach their second major semi-final in just 6 years, in the most remarkable fashion, having led games for just 9 minutes across the whole tournament. This meant the first 3 quarter-finals had seen the group winners crash out. Could Italy beat Spain to complete the set? Well, maybe. The game's gone to penalties after not much has happened across the 120 minutes. Italy had Buffon in net and had famously won the World Cup 2 years prior on penalties. They were seen as favourites at this point. But Casillas saved De Rossi and Di Natale's penalties, allowing Fabregas to send Spain to the semi-finals. Here, they ended Russia's magical run, smashing them 3-0, although both their front men, Pavlyuchenko and Arshavin, would earn moves to North London on the back of their tournaments. As you can probably guess in the other game, late goals were the story again, as Turkey once again equalised late on thanks to Semir Şentürk. However, as the Germans love to do, they killed the Cinderella story in the cruelest of fashions, as left-back Philipp Lahm scored a rare goal in the 90th minute to send Die Mannschaft to the final. In a European Championship of many upsets and shocks, we somehow ended with two of the pre-tournament favourites meeting in the final. The big story in the lead up to the game was the tournament's top scorer David Villa, who picked up an injury against Russia and was in a race against time to be fit. He ultimately failed to make it, with Aragonés opting to change shape and bring Cesc Fabregas into the team rather than making a like-for-like change. But it was Villa's strike partner, Fernando Torres, who scored the sole goal in a cagey final, earning Spain their first major honour in 44 years. Lucas Podolski's failure to score in the final meant Villa held on to his golden boot, whilst Xavi was awarded player of the tournament, although Andre Arshavin's impact on the finals will never be forgotten. Euro 2012 was hosted in Poland and Ukraine, with a multitude of issues overshadowing much of the finals. As early as 2008, issues began, with the government of Poland suspending their own FA over corruption issues, with UEFA threatening that the country could lose their hosting rights for the issue, although an agreement was reached that saw them maintain their hosting status. Other issues involved Ukraine coming under fire for killing stray cats and dogs in the lead up to the tournament, fears over public safety after a terrorist attack in Ukraine killed 29 people in April 2012, calls for a boycott over former Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko's mistreatment in prison, and unprecedented price hiking for accommodation in the host city of Lviv. Finally, in May 2012, BBC Panorama examined the issues of racism, anti-Semitism, and football hooliganism, which it stated were prevalent in Polish and Ukrainian supporters, although for balance, the documentary was criticised as sensationalist, unbalanced, and unethical from those in Ukraine and Poland. However, these issues did end up being prevalent factors for both local and travelling fans throughout both this Euros and the following one in France. Without getting into too much detail, there were numerous incidents of violence between opposing supporters and police at both Euro 2012 and Euro 2016, whilst Mario Balotelli, a star of the tournament, was subject to racist abuse from fans during games against Croatia and Spain, with Russian fans also being accused of racism in their match against the Czech Republic. A bit of an uncomfortable mood change now, as we talk about the football. Whereas 2008 qualifying threw up the shock of England, 2012 was much more normal, as all major nations qualified, with Portugal being the only one who required a playoff to make it. Host Ukraine were the only debutants, whilst the Republic of Ireland qualified for the first time since 1988. The group draw provided us with a clear group of death, and maybe another, depending on who you ask, in addition to two groups where there was a real lack of any genuine top side. And to one of those is where we go first. As host Poland, we're joined by three former champions, none of which were that rated anymore. The opening game would see the host face off against the most recent of those champions, Greece, in what would turn out to be a crazy game. Borussia Dortmund teammates Lukas Piszczek and Robert Lewandowski combined to give Poland the lead, before Greek centre-back partnership both left the pitch prior to half-time, Papadopoulos through injury, and Socrates due to a red card. However, the game would flip on its head in the second half, with Greece scoring a scrappy equaliser before Polish goalkeeper Szczesny conceded a penalty and received a red card. Substitute goalkeeper Titon saved the penalty, seeing the game end 1-1. Elsewhere, Russia beat the Czech Republic 4-1, but this wasn't a tale of the tape for these two teams, as the Czechs recovered to win their next two games to top the group, whilst Russia drew with Poland and lost to Greece to end up third. The other weak group consisted of England, France, Ukraine, and Sweden. England and France? Weak group? I know it doesn't make that much sense for us today, but in 2012, these nations were at a 21st century low. France had backed up their poor showing at Euro 2008, with finishing bottom of their group at the 2010 World Cup, with Raymond Dominique being sacked on this occasion, replaced with Euro 2000 winner Laurent Blanc, whilst England didn't do much better, winning just one of 4 games in South Africa. To add to England's problems, Wayne Rooney was suspended for the first 2 games, including the opener against France. The game finished 1-1, with neither team really proving their doubters wrong. 35-year-old legendary striker Andrei Shevchenko scored twice in response to a Zlatan Ibrahimovic opener to earn Ukraine a famous first Euro victory. With eyes now turned to the second game, where surely one of England or France would falter. Wait, they actually both won? Yeah, they did. France in relatively comfortable fashion against the host 2-0, thanks to goals from Jeremy Menez and Johan Cabaye, whilst England won in less comfortable fashion 3-2 against Sweden, thanks to goals from Andy Carroll, Theo Walcott and Danny Welbeck. You know what I said about these squads not being great? Yeah. But they would both advance. England top thanks to returning Wayne Rooney, and France second despite losing their final group game to an already eliminated Sweden. Group D was undoubtedly a group of death. Surprisingly for almost everyone watching, expected whipping boys Denmark beat the Dutch to kick off the group stage, with the loss beginning a snowball effect for the Dutch, losing all 3 games, leading to manager Bart van Marwijk resigning. So who would join them with an early ticket home? Denmark. Yes, despite Nicolas Bentner scoring a brace against Portugal and getting a £100,000 fine, I may add, for his celebration advertising betting company Paddy Power by lowering his shorts, Denmark lost 3-2. Despite Cristiano Ronaldo having an uncharacteristically poor game, although he would rebound from that with a wonderful performance against the Dutch, scoring twice to secure their place in the knockouts, finishing only behind Germany, who inspired by Mario Gomez went perfect in the group of death. Whilst the final group consisted of reigning world and European champion Spain, favourites to become the first nation to ever defend their European crown, the previous world champions Italy, the Republic of Ireland and Croatia, who, unbeknown at the time, had 11 players who would be part of their World Cup final reaching squad in this squad. Italy had crashed and burned in South Africa, but showcased they still had what it took to compete at the top table of international football by earning a well-deserved 1-1 draw against Spain, with their 3-5-2 modelled off Conte's invincible Juventus side causing the holders many problems. Whilst in the other game, there were no repeats of '88, as Ireland were comfortably beaten 3-1, and it would go on to get even worse for them, losing 4-0 against Spain and ending with a 2-0 defeat to Italy. Prior to that, Italy had drawn 1-1 with Croatia, meaning Croatia needed a score draw or a win to book their place in the knockout rounds. They lost 1-0. Yep, an 88th minute Jesus Navas goal would be enough to send Croatia home and see Italy qualify for the quarterfinals. You know what I said about there being 2 strong groups and 2 weak ones? Well, the quarterfinal proved this, as all 4 teams from Group B and C advanced, as an on-fire Cristiano Ronaldo scored a 79th minute winner against the Czech Republic, whilst Germany blew away Greece 4-2, with young winger Marco Reus impressing and scoring in his first start of the tournament, vindicating manager Joachim Löw's risk of resting key players for this match, whilst Laurent Blanc made the bizarre decision to play right back Debuchy on the right-hand side of midfield instead of Nasri against Spain, hoping to contain the deadly duo of Iniesta and Alba. But they failed. Iniesta played the ball through to Alba, who cross-found the head of Xabi Alonso for Spain's opener 19 minutes in, with Spain cruising to a 2-0 victory as clearly a superior side. The final quarter-final would be the closest in terms of score, as England and Italy went to penalties, although it's a bit misleading, as Italy were clearly the better side during the game, with Pirlo in particular putting on a masterclass, which would continue in the shootout when he scored the most iconic Euro Panenka since Panenka himself, as Italy won 4-2 on penalties following misses from Ashley Young and Ashley Cole. Portugal copied France's playbook of sitting deep against the Spanish and did so to much more success, taking the game to penalties. However, misses from João Moutinho and Bruno Alves meant Spain were 1 game away from making history. In the final, they would face Italy, who beat Germany 2-1 thanks to a brace from 21-year-old striker Balotelli, with his celebration becoming iconic. Following their draw with Spain in the group stages, Italy had cause for optimism, but this optimism was misplaced, as they were demolished 4-0 in the most one-sided final in championship history, with this generation of Spanish players establishing themselves as the most dominant in European history. Andres Iniesta was awarded player of the tournament, excelling in his unconventional role as a left winger, as Spain, now managed by Vicente del Bosque, were playing peak tiki-taka, implementing a strikerless system in which their front 6 players were all conventionally central midfielders. 6 players tied for top scorer with 3 goals apiece, but new tie-break rules had been introduced to determine a Golden Boot winner in assists and then minutes played. Despite starting just 2 times, Fernando Torres won the Golden Boot with 3 goals and 1 assist. Euro 2016 saw the most recent expansion of the European Championships, as 8 teams were added to complete a 24-team group stage, where the top 2 teams qualified in addition to the 4 best third-place finishers from the 6 groups. This new format removed much of the jeopardy of the group stage and theoretically protected major powers from failing to qualify, although the Netherlands, who were off the back of 2 top 3 finishes in the past 2 World Cups, finished 4th in their qualifying group behind the Czech Republic, Iceland and Turkey. Iceland's qualification was their first, with Wales, Albania and Northern Ireland joining them in this category, with the latter nation actually topping Group F, where 2004 champions Greece hit rock bottom, finishing dead last behind even the Faroe Islands. Whilst Belgium successfully navigated qualifying for the first time since 1984, with them now possessing a squad of players not only capable of competing at the finals, but actually winning it, placing as high as 3rd favourites before the tournament from some bookies, although the 2 clear favourites were the reigning world champions Germany, as well as 3rd-time host France, who had also seen a new generation of stars emerge since 2012, with the likes of Griezmann, Kante and Pogba. The group stages wouldn't see any major powers crush out, although Portugal only scraped through as one of the best 3rd place sides after drawing all 3 of their matches and finishing below both Hungary and Iceland. Despite a Daniel Sturridge injury time winner in the All-British Derby, Wales still managed to top their group thanks to goals from Gareth Bale in every group game. Back-to-back champions Spain lost their final group game to Croatia to finish 2nd, whilst a shock final day victory for the Republic of Ireland against group leaders Italy earned them a place in the last 16. A win for Northern Ireland against Ukraine was enough to see them advance as a best 3rd place team, whilst fellow debutants Albania didn't receive the same fate despite earning a historic victory against Romania. The first round of 16 of European Championship history would leave us with these fixtures, with Croatia, Portugal and Spain-Italy being the standout ties on paper, although Croatia-Portugal wouldn't live up to expectations, with Portugal once again ending the 90 minutes all level, although they would advance thanks to substitute Ricardo Quaresma's headed finish in the 117th minute. Italy, managed by Antonio Conte, had the same back 3 and goalkeeper who had led him to glory in Serie A with Juventus. However, outside of Daniele De Rossi, the rest of the Italian team were below the standard the Azzurri had set over the years, while Spain still had 8 of the 11 from 4 years earlier. But Italy caused a shock, winning 2-0 despite only having 41% of possession. Elsewhere, Germany and Belgium proved their credentials by winning 3-0 and 4-0 respectively, whilst Wales edged past Northern Ireland thanks to a 75th minute Gareth McCauley own goal, although Northern Irish fans' chants for striker Will Grigg to the tune of Free From Desire caught the imagination of fans across France and the continent as a whole. Republic of Ireland would also be eliminated at this stage, although they did cause a shock for the hosts, scoring thanks to a Robert Brady penalty just 2 minutes in. They would be able to hold on to this lead for 56 minutes until Antoine Griezmann broke their resolve, scoring the winner just 3 minutes later. A Xherdan Shaqiri wonder goal helped Switzerland take their match with Poland to penalties, where Granit Xhaka's awful penalty was the difference between the sides. This left us with one more tie, England against Iceland, the least populated nation to ever qualify for the tournament, with just 335,000 people, against the nation which created the sport, with world superstars Harry Kane, Wayne Rooney and Raheem Sterling in the lineup. Surely there's only one team who could win. Right? Well, no, an Iceland long throw and a Joe Hart mistake in quick response to an early Rooney penalty were what's with the team after 90 minutes, as Iceland's dentist/manager, Heimir Hallgrímsson, ended Roy Hodgson's England career in the greatest upset in the competition's history. They would also score 2 in the quarterfinal against France, but unfortunately concede 5. Whilst Germany snuck past our well-drilled Italians on penalties to set up a semi-final between the 2 pre-tournament favourites, while Simone Zaza's missed penalty became a meme around the world. A wonderful goal from wonderkid midfielder Renato Sanchez in response to an early Lewandowski goal, meaning for the 5th time in succession a Portugal game would end the 90 minutes all level, with this one remaining that way through extra time, sending the game to penalties, where Portugal won, reaching the semi-final without putting in an impressive performance across the tournament. Final quarter-final between Wales and Belgium created another crazy upset as the Dark Horses won 3-1, with unemployed striker Harry Robson-Kanu scoring a marvellous winner which incorporated a Cruyff turn in the year of his death. They would run out of steam in the next round, however, as without key players Ben Davies and Aaron Ramsey due to suspension, Portugal were able to win their first match in normal time of the tournament 2-0. So despite playing quite boring football under the management of Fernando Santos, Portugal were in the final with a not so talented squad, where outside of prime Cristiano Ronaldo and an on-fire Renato Sanchez, Portugal lacked the quality of their European rivals, highlighted by them being ranked 7th favourite prior to the Cup. The second semi-final was therefore earmarked as the final before the final, with both France and Germany expected to make easy work of Portugal. But they wouldn't, as France, who beat Germany 2-0 thanks to a Griezmann brace, couldn't be split after 90 minutes against Portugal, despite Cristiano Ronaldo being forced off with injury 25 minutes in, when in extra time against the hosts, Eder, a forward who had failed to score for Swansea in the Premier League the season prior, scored a wonder goal out of nowhere to earn Portugal their first major tournament against all the odds, with Ronaldo getting redemption for 2004 essentially as coach by the end of the match. Griezmann won the Golden Boot with the second highest goal tally in tournament history, trailing only Platini in '84, also becoming the first player to win an official player of the tournament whilst not playing for the winning side. Renato Sanchez was awarded the inaugural Young Player of the tournament and would earn a move to Bayern Munich off the back of his performances. From its outset, Euro 2020 was going to be unique, as UEFA planned to place the tournament across 11 host cities in celebration of its 60th year anniversary. Why 60 years is such an important milestone? I don't know, but the COVID-19 pandemic resulted in the tournament being pushed back a whole year, with many of the stadiums having limited capacity, including Wembley, who would host the semi-finals and final. No nation would be handed automatic qualification, with the newly formed Nations League providing new pathways for nations who failed to qualify through the traditional routes. North Macedonia utilised this route to qualify for the first time, whilst Finland finished second in their qualifying group to join them as the two debutants, whilst no major nation missed the tournament on this occasion. The group stage would be one of the dullest and most predictable in championship history, with these 8 nations failing to advance, with the most memorable moment unfortunately involving Denmark's Christian Eriksen, who collapsed on the pitch after suffering a sudden cardiac arrest. He was given immediate CPR from paramedics, and his teammates surrounded him to provide privacy. This vision would be shared around the world, with him thankfully being taken to hospital where he was stabilised, later going on to return to football, playing for Brentford, Manchester United and the national team once again. The match controversially resumed despite the Danish players being shaken up, with them reportedly being threatened with a 3-0 loss if they didn't continue. They would go on to lose the game 1-0 to Finland, although they would advance second following a 4-1 drubbing of Russia in their final group game. Group F was earmarked as the group of death, although all 3 of France, Germany and Portugal advanced due to the best third place rule, with Cristiano racking up an impressive 5 goals in the process. These performances would see Ronaldo become the first player to appear at 5 different Euros and overtake Platini as the tournament's all-time record scorer. These would be the round of 16 ties we were left with Denmark, now everyone's second team, smashing 2016 dark horses Wales 4-0. Italy, now managed by Euro 88 goalscorer Roberto Mancini, scored 2 in extra time to get past Austria, whilst the Czech Republic continued their tradition of overperforming in European Championships by beating the Dutch 2-0, following a Matthijs de Ligt red card. Belgium and England knocked out group of death survivors Portugal and Germany, whilst France was shocked by Switzerland. Coming in as world champions, France were seen as favourites and were in cruise control against the Swiss late on, over goals in the 81st and 90th minute, took the game to extra time and later penalties, where France lost after star man Kylian Mbappe missed his decisive penalty. Ukraine would upset an impressive Sweden side who atop their group ahead of Spain thanks to the latest winner in tournament history, when striker Artem Dovbyk headed home across in the 121st minute. Spain and Croatia played out an extremely entertaining encounter which included 8 goals, beginning with a comedic Spanish own goal but ending with 2 Spanish extra time goals to set up a quarter-final with dark horses Switzerland, where they would once again take one of the favourites to penalties, but on this occasion they couldn't replay their trick, missing 3 consecutive penalties to crash out. The standout tie for this round was between Italy and Belgium, who had been the most impressive teams at the finals, with Italy edging it 2-1 thanks to a lovely Lorenzo Insigne goal. England, now managed by Euro 96 penalty misser Gareth Southgate, were looking good, showcased by their 4-0 drubbing of Ukraine in Rome, whilst Denmark's fairy tale saw them reach the semis after beating the Czechs 2-1. The semi-finals would continue the tournament's abnormal amount of own goals and extra times, as England equalised against Denmark thanks to captain Simon Kjær putting the ball in his own net, bringing the tally of own goals to 11, more than the total number scored prior to these finals. England would reach the European final at last after Harry Kane scored the winner in extra time, whilst Italy and Spain were destined for penalty kicks. Here, Italian goalkeeper Gianluigi Donnarumma made himself a hero, saving Spanish striker Alvaro Morata's penalty, with midfielder Jorginho sending them to the final after a composed penalty. The final at Wembley would begin perfectly for England, as both their wing-backs combined to give them the lead just 2 minutes in, although as the game went on they began to lose control, with Italy scoring a deserved goal 23 minutes before time from experienced defender Bonucci, and that's how the game would end. Although Southgate made a bold decision to sub on Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho just before the 120th minute solely to take penalties. This would backfire as both players would miss their penalties, despite Jordan Pickford saving Jorginho's penalty to keep them alive. A Donnarumma save of teenager Bukayo Saka's final penalty saw Italy lift the Henri Deluni Cup, with it going to Rome rather than coming home, as Bonucci would famously say in the celebrations. Disgracefully, England's 3 penalty misses would receive horrific racial abuse following the final. although Donnarumma's performance earned him Player of the Tournament, and Spanish youngster Pedri was awarded Young Player of the Tournament, whilst Cristiano Ronaldo won the Golden Boot, although credit must be given to Patrick Schick, the Czech Republic striker, who was joint top scorer with 5 goals, including a marvellous halfway goal against Scotland. This would bring Italy alongside France as 2-time champions, although Spain and Germany remain the only 2 teams to lift Henri de Luni Cup 3 times, whilst Georgia's playoff victory against Greece for Euro 2024 continues the competition's rich history of having a nation debut at each edition of the championships.